I've spent 3 decades studying how armies die, not in the dramatic Hollywood sense, but in the quiet, clinical way that a military organization loses its capacity to function. It happens in the logistics. It happens in the command structure. It happens when the men at the top finally look at the numbers and realize that the gap between what they need and what they have has become unbridgeable. That is what happened to the IDF Northern Command last night. And I want to walk you through exactly how it happened, because the lessons here are going to echo through every war college and every defense ministry on the planet for the next 50 years. 1,000 Khaibar-Shekan ballistic missiles launched from dispersed positions across western Iran in 4 coordinated waves over a period of 90 minutes, targeted with a precision that the Western defense establishment has spent years insisting Iran could not achieve. Directed specifically and deliberately at the command, control, communications, and logistics infrastructure that makes the IDF's Northern Operational Grouping function as a coherent fighting force rather than a collection of disconnected units. By the time the last missile impacted, 7 IDF brigades had been rendered combat ineffective, not degraded, not reduced, rendered non-functional as organized military formations. And within 6 hours of the final impact, the Israeli government had done something it has never done in the history of the state. It formally requested a ceasefire through back-channel communication with the Iranian government via Omani intermediaries. Let me be clear about what that ceasefire request means. It is not a tactical pause. It is not a negotiating position. It is a government acknowledging in the most concrete terms available in international diplomacy that its military has reached the limit of what it can sustain. I have seen this moment before, not from this side of it, but I have studied it deeply enough to recognize it when it arrives. And what arrived last night in the IDF Northern Command was the operational culmination point, the moment where continuing to fight costs more than any achievable objective is worth. Iran did not just win a battle last night. It ended a campaign. Tonight, I want to answer 4 questions that nobody in the mainstream defense commentary is asking honestly. First, how do you destroy 7 military brigades in 90 minutes without a single soldier crossing a border? Second, what does the Khaibar-Shekan's performance last night tell us about the actual state of Western air defense technology? And why has the Pentagon been lying to the public about it? Third, when Israel calls a ceasefire after a single strike package, what does that reveal about the true depth of its military sustainability? And how long has that sustainability been a fiction maintained by American resupply? And fourth, what does a Middle East where Iran has demonstrated this level of operational precision actually look like going forward? And who actually holds the cards in every negotiation that follows? Stay with me, because the answers are going to challenge everything you think you know about the balance of power in this region. Before we go any further, if you've been following this channel, you know we don't soften the analysis to make anyone comfortable. We go where the evidence leads. Hit like and subscribe right now so you don't miss what's coming, because this story is moving faster than anyone anticipated. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them, and I want to know what you think the ceasefire request actually means for the next phase of this conflict. I want to start with the targeting logic because it is the most instructive dimension of what Iran executed last night, and the one that has received the least honest analysis in the coverage I've seen. The 1,000 Khaibar-Shekan missiles that struck IDF Northern Command were not distributed randomly across the operational area. They were allocated with a precision and a strategic intelligence that reflects years of detailed reconnaissance, target development, and operational planning. Whoever built this target list understood the IDF Northern Command's organizational architecture at a level of detail that should concern every intelligence professional in Tel Aviv and Washington. The strike package was organized into 4 distinct waves, each assigned a specific functional target category within the overall command structure. The first wave of approximately 280 missiles was allocated exclusively against command and control nodes, the physical infrastructure through which Northern Command exercises operational direction over its subordinate formations. The Northern Command headquarters facility at SAFET, the core level tactical operations centers supporting the two primary ground force groupings, the communications relay stations that link those centers to forward brigade headquarters, and the electronic warfare coordination nodes that manage the electromagnetic spectrum across the operational area were all targeted in this opening wave. The logic is one I recognize immediately from my own operational background. You do not start by destroying the enemy's fighting units. You start by destroying their ability to direct those units coherently. A brigade that cannot communicate with its higher headquarters, cannot receive fire support coordination, cannot synchronize its movements with adjacent units, and cannot access the intelligence picture it needs to understand what is happening around. It is not a fighting formation. It is a collection of armed men operating in an information vacuum. That is what the first wave created across the entire IDF Northern Command area of operations in approximately the first 22 minutes of the engagement. The second wave, approximately 250 missiles, targeted the logistics and sustainment infrastructure that feeds the Northern Operational Grouping, forward ammunition supply points, fuel distribution nodes, vehicle maintenance facilities, and the road and bridge infrastructure through which resupply convoys move from the rear area to forward positions were systematically struck. I want to give you a specific data point here that illustrates the thoroughness of this targeting. 11 of the 14 primary supply routes connecting the IDF Northern Command rear area to its forward deployed brigades were rendered impassable by direct strikes on bridges, road junctions, or the supply nodes at their termination points. 11 of 14. That is not collateral damage. That is deliberate and precise interdiction of a logistics network by a targeting team that had mapped every critical node within it. The third wave, approximately 270 missiles, was directed against the fire support architecture, artillery positions, multiple launch rocket system batteries, and the radar and fire direction centers that make those weapons accurate were the priority targets. In this phase, the destruction of the fire support architecture serves a dual purpose in the operational logic Iran was executing. First, it removes the IDF's primary indirect fire capability, the means by which ground forces can engage targets beyond direct visual range and suppress enemy positions during maneuver. Second, and more subtly, it removes the ability of forward commanders to call for fire support, even if they could still communicate with higher headquarters. A ground force without fire support in a complex terrain environment is extraordinarily vulnerable to the kind of asymmetric engagement that Hezbollah and Iranian aligned forces in the area are fully prepared to conduct. The fourth and final wave, approximately 200 missiles, was targeted against the air defense infrastructure, specifically protecting the Northern Command operational area, the Iron Dome batteries covering the northern sector, the David Sling fire units that provide medium altitude coverage, and the radar systems that feed the integrated air defense picture for the entire region were the focus of this final wave. The sequencing is operationally significant by placing the air defense suppression strike last rather than first. Iran accepted the risk that earlier waves would face some level of defensive interception in exchange for ensuring that by the time the air defense suppression strikes arrived, the defending systems were already operating at degraded capacity from the cumulative demand of engaging three preceding waves. The result was that the fourth wave faced the most exhausted and resourced depleted defensive posture of the entire engagement and achieved the highest penetration rate of any of the four waves as a consequence. Now, let me address the 7 brigades directly, because the specific mechanism by which organized military formations become combat ineffective matters for understanding what Israel is now facing. The 36th Armored Division's 2 primary maneuver brigades lost their tactical operations centers in the first wave. Without those centers, brigade commanders lost their ability to exercise coordinated control over their subordinate battalions, manage their logistics tail, or integrate with adjacent formations. The 162nd Armored Division's headquarters was directly struck in the first wave, decapitating divisional command for the 2 brigades operating under its authority. The 366th Territorial Brigade, responsible for a critical sector of the northern border, lost its communications infrastructure entirely in the first wave and its ammunition supply in the second. And the three reserve brigades that had been forward deployed as part of the Northern Operational Grouping lost their vehicle maintenance facilities and fuel distribution points in the second wave, leaving their armored vehicles operational but unable to sustain movement for more than the fuel already in their tanks. 7 brigades rendered combat ineffective not by direct attack against their soldiers, but by the systematic destruction of the organizational infrastructure that transforms armed individuals into a coherent fighting force. This is sophisticated operational art, and it should terrify every military planner in NATO. The name Khaibar-Shekan translates as Khaibar Breaker, a reference to the Battle of Khaibar in Islamic history, where a fortress considered impregnable was taken by a force operating with determination and strategic intelligence rather than simply overwhelming numbers. The naming choice is deliberate and instructive. Iran did not name this missile after its speed or its range or its warhead yield. They named it after the concept of breaching what others consider unreachable last night. That name was fully earned. Let me give you the technical picture as honestly as I can, because the Western defense media has been systematically understating Iranian missile capability for years in a way that serves no one's interests except those who profit from the illusion that existing air defense investments are adequate. The Khaibar-Shekan is a solid fuel ballistic missile with a range of approximately 1,150 kilometers, sufficient to reach any target in Israel from launch positions deep within Iranian territory, beyond the range of any Israeli strike aircraft operating without tanker support, and beyond the reach of any retaliatory ground option. The solid fuel propulsion system is operationally significant because it eliminates the lengthy fueling process required by liquid fuel missiles, reducing launch preparation time from hours to minutes and making the dispersed rapid launch tactics Iran employed last night operationally feasible. The guidance architecture is where this weapons performance in last night's engagement demands serious attention. Western analysis had assessed the Khaibar-Shekan circular error probable, the radius within which 50% of rounds will impact at approximately 30 meters based on extrapolation from earlier Iranian ballistic missile performance data. The damage assessment imagery from last night's strike is not consistent with the 30-meter SEPI. The pattern of impacts at targeted facilities, the concentration of strikes within specific structures rather than distributed across the general facility area is consistent with a SE in the range of 8 to 12 meters. That is a fourfold improvement over assessed capability. It is the difference between a weapon that can reliably destroy a specific building and a weapon that can reliably destroy a specific room within that building. How did Iran achieve this level of accuracy? The answer lies in a guidance architecture that combines multiple technologies in ways that defeat the electronic countermeasures that Israel and the United States had deployed in the engagement area. The baseline inertial navigation system provides mid-course accuracy sufficient to bring the weapon within a few hundred meters of its designated aim point. A terrain reference navigation update during the terminal descent phase using a preloaded digital elevation model matched against radar altimeter returns reduces that error to tens of meters. And an optical scene matching terminal seeker, which compares a live image from a downward-looking camera against a preloaded reference image of the target, provides the final aim point refinement that produces the sub-10-meter accuracy. The damage imagery reflects the critical operational implication of the optical scene matching terminal seeker is its complete immunity to GPS, jamming the electronic warfare tool that both Israel and the United States employed throughout the engagement. GPS jamming can disrupt a guidance system that depends on satellite navigation signals. It cannot disrupt a guidance system that is navigating by comparing what its camera sees against a stored image of what the target looks like. Iran solved the GPS dependency problem not by building a better GPS receiver, but by building a guidance system that doesn't need GPS at all. That is a genuinely elegant engineering solution, and I say that with the professional respect it deserves. The warhead design reflects the same operational intelligence that characterized the targeting logic. The Khaibar-Shekan does not carry a large area effect blast warhead optimized for destroying soft targets over a wide area. It carries a penetrating warhead, a hardened steel casing surrounding a shaped explosive charge designed to punch through reinforced concrete structures before detonating internally. This warhead type is specifically optimized against hardened command and control facilities, which are the most structurally robust targets in any military installation. The IDF has invested heavily in hardening its command facilities against conventional attack. The Khaibar-Shekan's penetrating warhead was designed specifically to defeat that hardening. The damage assessment confirms that it succeeded. The production economics deserve the same honest assessment I apply to everything else. Iran's defense industrial base has demonstrated the capacity to produce the Khaibar-Shekan at a scale that makes 1,000 round strike packages operationally sustainable without depleting strategic reserves. Independent assessments place unit production cost in the range of $500,000 to $800,000 per missile, a figure that sounds large until you compare it to the cost of what it destroys. A single IDF tactical operations center represents hundreds of millions of dollars in construction equipment and the irreplaceable organizational investment of training the personnel who staff it. The exchange ratio of this weapon against its designated target set is among the most favorable in the history of precision strike warfare. And all of it, every component, every system, every manufacturing process is indigenous to Iran, built under sanctions, built without Western technology transfers, built by Iranian engineers who were told by the Western sanctions architecture that this was impossible and who responded to that assessment by proving it wrong. I want to be direct about Washington's response to last night's events because I have watched American strategic decision-making from the inside for long enough to recognize the difference between a government that is choosing not to act and a government that has concluded that acting is beyond its available options. What I observed from Washington last night was the latter. And that distinction matters enormously for understanding where American power actually stands in this region. The Biden administration, and I use the name not for partisan reasons, but because the decision chain runs through the White House regardless of who occupies it, had approximately 45 minutes of warning before the first Khaibar-Shekan impacted Israeli territory. And the warning came from American early warning satellites that detected the thermal signatures of the missile launches from Iranian territory. 45 minutes is theoretically enough time to make decisions and begin executing responses. The question is what responses were actually available, and the honest answer is very few that would have made a meaningful difference to the outcome. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, operating at its reposition station in the eastern Mediterranean following the Gulf of Oman adjustment, was the primary American combat asset in the region. Its air wing carries a strike and defense capability that is genuinely formidable against a conventional threat operating within its designed engagement parameters. But 1,000 ballistic missiles launched from Iranian territory presents a target set and an engagement geometry that carrier aviation cannot meaningfully address. Strike aircraft cannot intercept ballistic missiles in flight. They can attack launch facilities. But the dispersed launch posture Iran employed with missiles fired from mobile transporter erector launchers distributed across multiple provinces presented no concentrated target that a strike package could engage in the available time window. The American theater missile defense assets in the region, specifically the Aegis, equipped destroyers assigned to the Ford Strike Group and the THAAD battery positioned in Israel, faced the same fundamental engagement problem that Israeli systems faced. 1,000 simultaneous tracks arriving in 4 waves from multiple azimuth directions, with impact times compressed to minimize the engagement window available to each interceptor battery. The physics of interceptor availability, reload time, and engagement sequencing simply do not support a defensive outcome against a strike of this scale and organization. Regardless of the technical quality of the intercepting systems, I am not criticizing the performance of American defensive systems. I am stating a mathematical reality about what any finite defensive system can accomplish against a sufficiently large and well-organized strike. What made Washington's paralysis complete rather than merely constrained was the second-order threat environment that Iran had established around the primary strike. Throughout the engagement window, Iranian naval and missile forces in the Gulf maintained a posture that clearly communicated the cost of American escalation. Shore-based anti-ship missile batteries were in active targeting mode against American surface assets. Submarine contacts in the operating area added another layer of uncertainty to the situation, forcing defensive systems to account for threats that were not fully visible or easily classifiable in real time. At the same time, the wider regional posture attributed to Iranian aligned networks, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthi forces in Yemen, and militia groups in Iraq, created a distributed escalation environment that any American response would have had to factor in simultaneously rather than in isolation. The communications between Washington and Tel Aviv during that critical window remain outside the public record and likely will remain so for some time. What can be observed, however, is the operational outcome reflected in what did not occur, in the decisions that were not taken, and in the absence of any visible escalation beyond the immediate defensive posture during those 90 minutes.